Hi, this is the show with Ron. I'm Ron, and we've got headlines. Now, first off, here is one of these headlines that I could have presented to you uh, any time between today and all the way back to 1999, and it would seem like it would fit in that year. And this is the continuing existential crisis that the internet seemed to have had on the news media. The traditional good investments of the news media, the print media. Everybody's going to have to read the newspaper on the subway on the way to work, or or watch the evening news. All of these all of these venues that used to be good investments. Now, as you see, there's some billionaires who buy into it, as happened to the Washington Post, as happened to the LA Times. These are sort of hobby horses, hobbies of for these billionaires to rejuvenate, to tell the correct news, but that they all seem to fail eventually. And now we have another round of big layoffs. There's little periods of time in which we hear stories that, the Washington Post or the New York Times has got its subscriber system down, and they're making money because people are subscribing online to their newspapers. But I don't know where all this is going to end. And now we have this AI thing where they're allowing big companies like Microsoft or Google to just plagiarize, to amalgamate other people's work and present it so you don't need reporters at all. Very, very scary because, you need an informed populace. And on top of that, the news venues have responded to these challenges by becoming more opinionated, and I think people trust the media less than ever before, and all this churn has made it worse. It's the whole point, maybe, of my channel here, where I try to give context, because there is so much opinion, commentary, and analysis that is being couched as just straight up factual news. Here we have, of course, Trump won the New Hampshire primary very handily. That's quickly swept off the front pages by an article like this. Trump has a big jury payout. All these things are always reduced on appeal, but this is a defamation case. Usually, it's a little unusual to have a payout this big. The story behind all this is there were accusations of rape that went all the way back to the 1990s. The statute of limitation ran out. New York State temporarily lifted the statute of limitations so they could bring a case against very, very old claims. And guess who had the case brought against him? Trump. And then after they got that case, the ruling against him, then piggybacking on that, they have this defamation case. And guess when it happens to be coming to all fruition? Right now in the middle of the primaries. So I have no doubt that Trump probably deserves all this. And, in some cases, the statute of limitations extension is a good thing to have. But I think this plays up the case that if you want to play in big politics and mess around with people and be disruptive like Trump has been, you better be clean as a bean, because they have ways to come after you, and this is one of them where the whole system is working against Trump at this point. Whether you believe that's right, that's what should happen for the good, or whether you think that's terrible, that is what is happening. It's What a coincidence that all of this is happening right now in the middle of primary season. Of course, Trump is his own worst enemy. It's a couple little stories here about the next South Carolina primaries coming up. Here we have on the Democrat side, Biden third-year job approval average of 39.8, second worst. You know, the stories pop up in the press about, oh, Biden might beat Trump in a head-to-head battle, these sorts of things. All of those articles are sort of trying to season the electorate to think things aren't quite so bad on the Democrat side, but Biden is facing a very difficult series of statistics regarding his approval rating. So I know, especially overseas, you see all the negative articles about Trump, and there's an assumption that no one would ever vote for him, but that's really not the case. He's looking pretty good now, despite all of the articles in the press that are attempting to settle you down and mitigate the idea that Trump could be a threat, or that he could even be president again. If you don't want that, it's still a danger out there. Here's another thing. I always like to mention RFK Jr. The only time I ever get spikes in my video is when I mention him or tag him. I don't know why. There must be some people who really like him. Of course, this is the son of Robert Kennedy, who was assassinated in the late 60s when he was running for president. But this Robert F. Kennedy is one of these weird vaccine deniers, and all got wrapped up in all these conspiracy theories. Not really what I think the left assumed they would get from the son of one of the great martyrs of their party, one of the great martyrs of the nation. And he's running as an independent. His candidacy could, I don't know that it's really clear who is going to disadvantage. Some people say because of the name, because of the legacy, it might cut into Biden's support. But then there's other polls that say because of the policies, because all this stuff about vaccines and COVID and all this stuff have became political footballs intermeshed with Trumpism and kind of trolling right-wing people, and RFK in a lot of his policies or a lot of his beliefs, especially the vaccine denial, is connected maybe a little more with the right wing than the left wing. But, you know, it raises a specter of what could happen could be if there's an election of if there's more than two major candidates, and not just Republicans and Democrats, there'd be another one, and no candidate would get the required 270 electoral votes. Then the election would be thrown into the House of Representatives, where I believe each state gets a vote. I had to check on something there. And so since the Republicans have the majority now, the Republicans could just vote their guy in. So, you know, then the whole electoral system plus the popular vote is not even going to be considered. It's just the presidency would be decided by the House of Representatives. So that's a long way down the road now, but that's kind of the specter of a powerful third-party candidate could mess up the Electoral College with no one getting the majority, and then it would go into the Congress to decide the presidency. You're executing people. We like to do that in the U.S. Florida moves to bar kids from social media. That seems okay. I've also read articles, and this has come up in the last week or so, whether this is one of the moral panics. We have these in the United States. Maybe in the 80s, we had like Dungeons and Dragons. It's just some role playing game, a fun little role playing game, but the media whipped it up into a big frenzy that caused parents to think people were worshiping the devil or something. The same thing with rock and roll, with backwards messages. This becomes something that supposedly worries parents needlessly, and then you get out maybe 5 years or 10 years from that time period, and people look back and say how ridiculous that was. So I wonder, well, it's been brought up whether this sort of thing is another one of our moral panics. Whether is it really causing the damage? Did TikTok really cause American colleges to go down the drain and support terrorists like Hamas in kidnapping people in Israel? Or I don't know. But I don't know. It's probably safe to limit kids' interaction with these social media sites that are kind of designed to capture their attention, especially when it can plug in weird social thoughts about politics into their minds at a very young age. So here is perhaps a companion piece to this idea of what happens when you stick your nose out into politics. You see what has happened to Trump, for good or evil, for better or for worse. Then here we have this DA who is prosecuting Trump down in Atlanta for the claims that the election was stolen, or the idea that he was trying to manipulate things down there to find more votes. So, like I say, when you dip your toe in these waters, you got to make sure you're clean as a bean. So they've uncovered somehow that the DA that's going after Trump either hired her boyfriend or hired some guy who did become her boyfriend, and there was some favoritism or whatever. This is the garden variety scandal, but yeah, this is all part of the idea that when you play on these biggest stages of politics and media, they will look into your background and play this up in the media. And of course, see, that's in the New York Post, which is a right-leaning publication. So they're going to enjoy playing up these scandals that might help the Trump side. Inflation slowing. This is, of course, they've sort of preset the banks this year to make sure that the Fed, which is supposed to be independent, to make sure that no recession can possibly begin this year, even if it should at some point. We're way past the time when we have a recession, and the media, kind of with one voice, has started this idea of a terminology, and this has happened a lot. It's called vibe economy, and all of the media have used it all at once to try to explain to voters that if they think that food prices are too high, or that there's something, that homelessness is too great, they're just mistaken. Because they say there's no evidence of that, even though homelessness, I believe, is at an all-time high, and while overall rates of inflation have gone lower for foodstuffs, for things that real average people use, people really do feel the pinch. Young people really do feel the pinch of trying to rent apartment buildings or whatever. And so the media has kind of come out to defend the administration that's in power, to say that Don't blame any of these economic things on the presidency. So it does happen because the overall bias in the media is to the left in the United States. So they can't really help themselves from doing that. NSA secretly buying Americans' data without a warrant. Think you can legally do that? I mean, here's my conspiracy theory. You know all those VPN services? I doubt if I'll ever get big enough that anyone will want to sponsor me, but this will guarantee that those VPNs won't. It's just my opinion. I believe that all of that VPN stuff is readable, and my government is getting all that information that you think you're hiding in your VPN. So if you're doing anything other than just trying to watch Netflix in another country with that VPN, my government knows everything that's in those systems. So I don't take anyone's word for it that the server's somewhere else and no one can get to it and they're not keeping logs. And in a way, I think that's how it should be. That's how the U.S. got to its primal position. They didn't get there by sitting on a log. And here we have the NSA. I mean, it is a little scary for the government to be looking into all of these issues, but I think on balance, with the terrorism in the world since 9/11 in the world we live in now, I would be, if the NSA wasn't doing this, if it wasn't buying all this data and checking on people, I would think they should be. But anyway, I suppose the danger is always that such systems, such collection of information could be misused at some point. If someone decides we don't want people thinking certain things, or we decide to prohibit certain sorts of speech. Maybe some of the people during the COVID time where they wanted to talk about the efficacy of wearing masks or side effects to vaccines. They just were blocked from doing so, which didn't really tamp down the controversy. It just makes people think that something is being hidden. But I don't know. The more we get online, the more we're in these systems where we have to be logged in and they know who we are. It does raise the specter that certain vectors of speech can be closed down. Vaping? Why did we ever allow this to come back? My whole childhood and growing up, it was only continuous talk about how evil smoking was and the cigarette companies are, and then suddenly we get all the teenagers vaping overnight and there's no regulation against it. And I can only imagine that this is because of the Congress in these countries, in our country, in the United States, being captured by big interest. You know, a lot of countries in the world, they don't allow vaping at all because they see it as an attempt to bring back smoking, which it is, but I don't know. For these sort of moral or sin issues, it's best to listen to the preponderance of people in society. So if they want it, I guess we have to have it. All this stuff here. I kind of missed this. I skipped a day in doing the headlines, and there was the Supreme Court decision. United States, we had in Texas trying to fortify its border because the federal government in the Biden administration has a new and different policy. Some people just saying one side is against immigration in the United States and the other wants just immigration like we've always had it, but that's not the case at all. The Biden administration has sort of allowed open borders for some reason. That it's not clear the reason why that has been. And at the same time, at certain times, now as we're getting to the election, the Biden administration is saying we need stronger than ever border controls because obviously this has become an issue for voters. So here we have a back and forth, a toing and froing here in Texas, where Texas has put up barbed wire and the federal government is cutting it down. And then the Supreme Court has ruled against Texas. I looked at the ruling a little bit. It's not a legal expert to characterize it, but it wasn't saying that the federal government really has primacy over all of these issues, like that you would have a civil war, which is some of this articles are implying. It just said that the federal government had good reason to take down some of the wires because it created a danger for either themselves or other people who were coming across the border. This is an issue that very well could backfire against the Biden administration. That the way that they've opened the borders, new policy, something different. It's not just anti-immigration to oppose this, but why they did it, I don't know. I don't even know if you're allowed to speak about why, the theories about why they've tried to have these open borders. It may just be virtue signaling. But we've already seen the Biden administration speaking out a little bit against this, maybe tighten things up again a bit. This is a weird thing here. I never even got on board this, and now I'm already behind the curve. And this isn't the only article about this. EV's a fading fad. Turn on the air conditioner here. These are the electric vehicles. This is probably from a U.S. perspective because I know in other countries overseas, there's just suddenly on the street, there's all these different cars with weird names you've never even heard of. And for decades, all the cars would be either American brands or usually like a Toyota or a subsidiary of Toyota and all of the Japanese companies. Then there's some of the few upstart Korean ones came in, but usually you'd see if a car came in with a name you didn't know, I'd say, oh, that's just a Toyota one, or this is a Hyundai. But suddenly we have a lot of cars on the streets. Some of these Southeast Asian countries I visited, and they're all Chinese. China's coming on strong. So I'm sure EVs will be still big in a lot of other countries because the U.S. is energy independent. We have our own oil, but a lot of countries, a lot of little countries, a lot of Asian tiger countries, a lot of powerhouse countries, they import almost all of their oil. And any oil that they do make has to be sent far away to be refined. So those countries, it behooves them to try to limit their oil imports. But in the United States, the United States has been heavily subsidizing these electric vehicle sales, in effect funneling a lot of taxpayer money to people like Elon Musk and other people who are running these. So apparently consumers are already turning away from buying purely electric vehicles. And we saw just in the big blizzard situation in the United States where the way they make these vehicles with the batteries, they don't charge or they won't start easily during the very cold weather. So we have, of course, Toyota. Toyota has already been making these hybrid cars that have some electric and some gasoline engine. Yeah, EV doubters like Toyota, which instead bet on hybrids, now look prescient. So, who knows? That's weird. I never expected it would snap back like this. But I think the caveat is to this article is that a lot of countries in the world will still want to go with electric vehicles. You see, you'd say, well, electric vehicles, they still need power, and you still need maybe oil or fuel oil to run the electric plants. But the idea is that these electric plants, you could go solar, you could go wind, they can be powered by something like that. Plus, it's better for pollution because now each car, it's its own little pollution factory if it has a gasoline engine. But if everything's electric, there'll still be some pollution from the factory, but that's one entity that can be controlled for the pollution. And overall, when you look at all the figures, the way that the factories can be run that produce electricity, it's much better to get away from the decentralized oil chugging vehicle and all the infrastructure in gas stations and moving around gas that entails. USA moving nukes to UK to counter threats from Russia. Russia has been talking big, coming on strong. Most people would assume that this means that there's a certain kind of weakness in the bellicose manner of which Putin is speaking. By the same token, Russia is seeing that the United States, the populace is not exactly interested in the huge funding demands that the war in Ukraine entails. And I just wanted to note this is no U.S. nuclear weapons, no warheads, no war. All of these people, God bless them, who are for nuclear disarmament, I'll tell you, there's probably going to be none of that's going to happen in their lifetime because of the geopolitical lesson that every country in the world learned from what happened in the Ukraine. It was in the early 90s. I was 94, something like that, 95, 96. I think there were several agreements in several countries in the former Soviet Union. So when the former Soviet Union broke up, there were a lot of different states, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, that had nukes stationed in them from the former Soviet Union. So the United States and other Western democracies said, before we had to deal with one nuclear power, USSR, so any agreement could apply to the whole thing. Now suddenly overnight we've got all these other little countries that are nuke states now. So they signed these agreements that said all of these satellite areas of the former Soviet Union, you give away your nukes, send them back to the Soviet Union, dismantle your infrastructure so you're nuke free. And that'll mean the U.S. will just have to deal with Russia as a nuclear power. Now, the guarantee that, well, really it was like UK and US, but it was under NATO auspices. The guarantee was that in these agreements, Russia, they agreed never to invade any of these countries because that's what the nukes would do. You have mutual assured destruction. If you try to attack or take over, we nuke you, and then you nuke us, and so you don't want to do that. So it keeps the countries apart. So there was sort of an implied security agreement that the Western democracies would ensure that Russia's not going to bowl over any of these states. Well, I don't know how many years that would, about 20, 25 years later, Russia was invading different areas of the former republics, and then they invaded the Ukraine. So the lesson that Ukraine gets, and every country in the world gets, is they were stupid to rely on any security agreements with the West to say, give up your nukes, you'll be safe from Russia. And this means that any country in the world, you know, we have Pakistan, India, we have North Korea with its nukes. We only care about North Korea because they have nukes. That's why we want to give them lots of money back, where we have to deal with them. Everybody knows that's why they're important. There's another pugnacious country, Myanmar. They were going to start a nuke program. U.S. started concentrating them. We got them to give it up. Now nobody cares about them. They're just this festering country there that's every bit as brutal as North Korea has been, but they made a big mistake in giving up their nukes. And so, unfortunately for people who want nuclear disarmament, this failure of the West to be able to back up its security guarantees means that no country is going to give up its nukes in probably any of our lifetime. So if that's not cynical enough for you, let's get on to something that's a little more. If there's anything that is good in the news today, Leah Obama, being a filmmaker, rich kids always do something artistic, you know. If you don't have to worry about making you always become a musician or an artist, that would be nice. This is something. So they went in and they looked at all the search terms from Google by state. So people were saying, can narcissists change? What does narcissism mean? So then they said, well, which states have the most people searching for stuff like this? And so they say those must be the most narcissistic states. So I just wanted to mention about, you probably, if you're on YouTube, you'll see all these things about how to tell if your friend or your significant other or someone else is a narcissist, a psychopath, a sociopath. You see, it's always other people who are crazy. It's your problems are never have anything to do with you. It's all the crazy people around you. And I consider all of those videos you see on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube about how to tell that other people out in the world are crazy, how all the other people, it's almost like astrology, because those astrology little blurbs, they're meant, you read them and they're generalized, and any person can read any little astrology blurb, and you kind of think, oh, that applies to me. And the way these narcissism videos are created really do, they do please a person's ego. You know, there's a lot of people who claim, I don't know if they really are doctors or psychiatrists, psychologists, who are presenting these, and they do it in kind of like a very smug manner, like, oh yeah, you know how those narcissists are, and that it appeals to our own ego, and how it is natural, I guess a natural psychological thing to believe that we are right and other people are the problem. But all this talk about narcissism has to do with that. It's trying to play to our egos and try to say that our problems are other people's, are due to the evil other people that surround us. Everybody else is crazy. We're the only sane one. It makes us look at the world in a cynical way. Taylor Swift to sue over AI nudes. They should. You know, Google, Microsoft, they're responsible for a lot of this stuff. You should not be able to, their systems should not be able to be available to create fake audio of Joe Biden telling voters not to go out to vote, or using the faces of famous people. Why don't trademark or copyright apply to any of this? How can Google scrape the web for all the content and then use it for this AI plagiarism? It's outrageous. I think that's about it. I'm getting worked up today. But that's the news. Here, this is my novel. Whoops. Where to say, here, this is my novel. Young people find their dreams and failures in Bangkok, and then go on to the furthest places in search of something the modern world can no longer give. This is the story of There Are Still Unknown Places, my new novel on sale at Asia Books and on Kindle ebook. It's a tale for a new generation, disillusioned by the promises of the world, wanting to search for their destinies in far-off places. If you read it, please let me know what you think. It's a work of literature that I worked very hard on, and it's supposed to capture something of this time, something of the disillusionment of the zeitgeist of this time, which I think is occurring right now with people in the world. So before we go, we do daily here. We have our Art of War playing cards, a really cool, fun thing. Each one has some wisdom from more than a millennia ago from some Chinese guy. And today's advice is incapacitate the leadership. Okay. Cripple the capacity of your adversary's leaders to assert their influence. A loss of leadership pushes your adversary towards disorganization and defeat. So typically with these, we look at how we could apply these in our business or our personal lives. So this is a little extreme. There was another one called Loot a Burning House. I'm not sure we really want to apply this in our normal days. This reminds me of unsettled times in the world, the late 60s, where we had so many assassinations. And some people are saying we're reaching another juncture of history now where there might be disillusionment. We certainly see, the Republicans painting Biden as the ultimate evil, and even maybe more so on the other side. Many people painting Trump as the ultimate evil. Who knows what that kind of dialogue could lead some crazy, nutty people to. So anyway, that's the show with Ron. That's with me. This is what it's about. We're adding some context, trying to maybe not get too worked up over the news, understand what's really behind it, what's really going on outside of the bias that's in the press and that everything that we're fed to control us. So I'll see you tomorrow for more headlines.